Hello guys, welcome to lesson number 59 in our series Drawing Tutorials for Beginners. Towards the end of the last lesson, what we were working on was bringing some value into the nose and just working in these darker areas. So what we're going to start adding today is we're going to start adding a little bit more value to the rest of the dog's face. We're going to be using an HB, 2B and a 4B pencil. We've also got our Mono Zero eraser and our 2-inch soft brush. And we've also got our Kneaded eraser, which we just need to freshen up slightly. So whenever I need to freshen up my Kneaded eraser, just pull it apart a little bit and it really does make a good job of it. Having a lot of fun with this. I'm really glad that we did start with the eyes because we've got that sort of centerpiece there already. So without further ado, let's start. I'm going to start with the HB pencil because we did find towards the end of the last lesson that just going in with the 2B pencil doesn't really give us the base and foundation that we really want. It just left it a little bit grainy. So just working into some of these, I'm just working in this crease that we can see in our dog's ear. Holding the pencil very loosely. I had a couple of people over on the Facebook group recently saying how when they do draw for long periods of time that their wrist starts to ache. Now what that's suggesting to me is they're holding the pencil possibly too tight. So as you can see, I'm holding the pencil more towards the back end of the pencil rather than the actual lead itself. And I'm holding it very loosely. It's been good seeing some of your progress with our dog portrait. If you've just found the group or you've just found the YouTube channel, thank you so much for clicking on that link. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, then go and check that out. It's called Tutorial Tuesdays Beginner to Pro. And I've got all of the videos and playlists. They're all on the group. They're all the reference images are in there as well. I've had a few people asking how to find the reference images. Basically, if you go to the top of the Facebook group, there are some headings there, and I think one of them says photos. You click into that and then there's a section that says reference images, and that will give you all of the project reference images that we've done so far. We've been going for, I think, what's coming up for 4 months now. We're on, like we say, lesson 59, and I started this out because I wanted to just try and pass on some of my knowledge that I've picked up really over the last three and a half years. I've paid for art classes, I've been part of online classes, I've done a lot of trial and error, and I just thought it would be something that I would enjoy doing, just giving back and just showing people the things that I've learnt. And I'm sure in a very similar way to what you guys and girls have been doing, you're going around and trying different methods out, watching different YouTube videos, maybe trying charcoal, maybe trying different blending techniques and things like that, which is exactly what I did. And what you do is of course you learn, you're constantly learning. But I wanted to sort of piece together the things that I've picked up, the things that have worked for me. Because there's a lot of things that haven't worked for me. And if we can make your journey slightly quicker, because you don't then need to make those silly mistakes that I've made. And if I can help that, if I can show you the things that have definitely worked for me, for example, the materials that I use Caran D'ache pencils. They're called the grafwood range. They're not the cheapest of pencils, I must say, but I've been using them now for a few years. And that was again after a lot of trial and error. I've gone through lots of different pencil brands and lots of different types of pencils within those brands. And there's not a huge difference. You know, I'm going to put that out there. I know there's a lot of people that are caught up with this idea of trying to get the best pencils and the most expensive pencils and the most expensive paper. And I did go through that kind of stage initially. Obviously, when we're starting something new, there's many pitfalls out there, and marketing can be obviously something that companies spend millions of pounds on a year. And it's very easy to get drawn into this notion that having the best equipment or the most expensive equipment is going to somehow elevate your skills from where they are to where you want them to be. And yes, of course, having the right equipment helps. But what really is the key ingredient is your ability to use that equipment. And I'm pretty certain now that I could quite happily use a very cheap set of pencils as long as there was a variation to the value. I did make a video over a year ago now. I was on holiday and I just found some very cheap pencils. They were just one pencil, and I did a bit of a video to see how well I could draw. It was a mountain in the background. It was a lovely landscape with just the one pencil. And it's almost impossible. You know, you can't really make something look realistic by just using one pencil. I guess it would have been an HB pencil. That tends to be the generic pencil that you get in schools and hotels and things like that. It's a very versatile pencil. It's actually the pencil we're using at the minute. To make something look realistic, we need to be able to alter the value, have those subtle changes, those subtle dark patches fading into light patches. If you've not had a look at our my playlist called Essential Pencil Skills, that's lessons 1 to 6. It's the starting point of this journey, really. I really would recommend having a watch of those, and even if you've been with us for a while, don't hesitate to go and revisit those types of videos, because as I learnt, as I was improving my skills, it was very important sometimes to go back over the basics. Sometimes we can get bogged down with the details and move on too quickly, and if we're missing the fundamentals and the foundations, it's very, very easy to produce work that you're not necessarily happy with, and it's very difficult to put your finger on why. And I can remember going back a few times and picking up things that I'd missed, very subtle changes, subtle differences to do with the pressure of pencil and how the tapered stroke works, which is exactly what I'm using now. So for those of you that are new to this group, what we're doing is we're building our value up using a series of tapered strokes. Now, a tapered stroke is a pulling action, a line pulling towards me, so I'm always pulling down towards me. And I'm trying to get these lines to stay as close together as possible. I'm not scribbling, so I'm not making an up and down movement. Although it looks like that on the video, I'm making a series of downward strokes, and I've done so many of them and practiced so many of them over the years now, I can get them quite accurate, so I can leave very little space between the lines. And what that does is it gives us a lovely value. It creates a very, very blendable value. Now, when I talk about blending, what you'll notice if you've just joined us is we aren't going to use anything to blend with. So we're not going to be using blending stumps, Q-tips, tissue paper, anything like that. We're actually going to use the pencil itself to create the value changes. I have used blending stumps before on my sort of initial journey and my initial phases of learning the skills. The reason I don't like to use a blending stump is it creates a burnished effect on the paper. And what that means is you've flattened the tooth of the paper down, trapping the graphite in there. And that makes it almost impossible to take value away. Now, taking value away is not just something that we have to do to make corrections. So it's not when we've just made a mistake. To make something look very realistic, what we have to have is we have subtle changes in values. We want to get away from flat values and flat tones. So using our kneaded eraser, we're going to be able to take some very subtle amounts of graphite out of certain areas, building the values up as we go, but certainly towards the end, where we go through a process called balancing the values. And the blending stumps don't allow that. So important to me that we hold on to the tooth of the paper. The second reason why I'm an advocate for building the value up slowly, going through your pencils, is that we can avoid to a large extent something called Graphite Shine. And Graphite Shine, as I'm sure you're aware, is something we want to try and avoid. It happens because the particles of graphite are very, very flat as they come away from the pencil. If you were to look under the microscope at them, they are very, very flat. And because of that, if we're using a blending stump, what we do is we flatten the tooth of the paper down and we have more of a uniform layer of this very, very flat particles. And what that does is it reflects the light. So from lots of angles you're drawing, if you've used a blending stump or even if you've bared down too hard with just the pencil, you have this ugly shine to your work. One way around that is to use charcoal pencils. The particles of the charcoal are very, very much a rougher texture, a rougher surface to them. And as a result, they do not reflect the light the same way that graphite does. However, charcoal in itself is a very, very different medium to work with. Something that I've explored, not to huge lengths, but certainly something that I've worked with. Okay, I'm gonna use some of the 2B pencil now, and I'm just going to work in this inner crease where the ear just meets the head. Now, building the layers up in a very, very soft and methodical way is also going to allow us, as we get towards the final stages of this drawing, it's going to allow us to use our eraser to take out some of those very, very fine white hairs that you can see all over this drawing. Obviously this dog is covered in hair. It's a short-haired dog. It's actually my brother's dog. Her name's Myla. And this is a picture that they took sometime early in the year, early 2019, possibly March this year. And my brother had been asking me for a while to draw a picture for him. He wants to get a picture of his dog up on the wall. And I'd always been rather busy, but since starting the group, it's become very obvious that lots of you are into your pet drawings and pet portraits and learning how to draw hair. So I thought that this would make a fantastic project, and at the end of it I can give my brother a Christmas present that will be a nice surprise. So I've not been any of you that follow me over on Instagram, I've not been posting any of this portrait over on Instagram because my brother and his son and wife all follow me on Instagram. So I'm posting these images obviously in our group, which they're not part of because they're not artists. So we're keeping it a bit of a secret. And hopefully I can make a nice job of Myla. I'm using the same pressure with all of my pencils, and what I'm not doing with any of the strokes is I'm not going anywhere near the limit to how hard I can press. There's lots and lots more value that I can get to make it easy to understand. If the hardest that I could push down onto the paper so that I'm going to snap the lead, if we number that number 10, just for an example, if the hardest I could push down right now with this pencil was a 10, I would say that I am applying this layer at about a number 2 in terms of pressure, just to give you an idea of how loose and how light I am applying this graphite. So if the hardest I could push was a 10, then I'm sitting in the region of a 2 or a 3 here. And I'm just using my 2B pencil, and every few pencil strokes what I'm doing is I'm just turning my pencil so that I'm always using a nicely sharpened edge. You don't want to use a dull pencil, but also by rotating the pencil every few strokes, what I do is I self-sharpen the pencil. I'm actually using my pencil on an edge, so it's beyond 45 degrees. Excuse me, I've had a little bit of a cold recently. It's very rare that I pick anything up, but I've had a little bit of a tickly cough, nothing major. I really enjoyed the Statue of Liberties that some of you have been posting over on the group. That was our last project. I can't remember the names now, but there's been a few of you that have posted them, and as I'm scrolling through the group and I saw a couple of them, I thought that they were mine. I thought, oh, there's somebody must have commented on my picture of my Statue of Liberty, and then I've taken a closer look and it isn't mine, it's one of yours, which is fantastic because, you know, we've sort of worked on them together, not at the same time, but you know, in some cases thousands of miles away, and for it to come out and look as though the drawing is exactly the one that, you know, I'd produced is wonderful. So I'm just going to give that a slight brushing now. So using our very soft brush, I'm just going to brush some of this value into the area of the ears that we haven't touched yet. Now these Caran D'ache pencils are quite soft. The graphite does move around quite easily. this is the closest that we're going to get to any type of blending. And because we are using such a soft brush, there's no risk of me grinding this graphite down into the tooth of the paper. I'm still going to be able to erase. So going back to my HB pencil now, I'm just going to, even though we've gone into an area already, which we had HB to start with, I then started layering some of my 2B, and I'm now going to go back over and start layering again with the HB, and that's how we get a very, very dark value without going to the limit of the pencil. So again, you can see that I'm being able to bring the value up with this HB pencil, even in an area that we've already got 2B. And that's something that, once you've mastered that skill, you can really start to get these very subtle changes in value. We don't have these harsh lines and this graphite shiny effect. So anywhere that I can see a line between two values, unless that's something that the reference image is showing me, I'm just going to soften the edge out. I'm just going to blend away, fade away from it. Now you can see that in this area here, we've not quite got a definite line. This to me looks as though it's a slight fold in the ear. It isn't two objects overlapping like we have here into that, but it is certainly a change of direction, and the light is hitting this side more than this side. So I guess we've got kind of a hill, almost a crease in the ear. So working with this HB pencil in that area, and I constantly keep flicking my eye from the reference image over to my drawing, constantly working in the darkest areas, building the value up. And enjoying the process. This is very therapeutic for me. It's not a rush. I think if I had one golden rule or one golden lesson that I could teach you, that I've picked up over the years, it's take your time. This is going to take us in the region of 15 hours. You know, we're not doing this in 2 1-hour sittings. Will you get faster? Yes, you will. But the aim of this is not to become super speedy at it. The aim is to do the best job that you can. And unfortunately, this process that we use does take a little bit longer, but the outcome is better than anything that I've come across. I see some wonderful drawings that people, you know, they've used blending stumps and things like that, and the drawings look wonderful from a distance. But as you then get closer to it, you can see the graphite shine. You can see that they've made mistakes and they've been unable to correct them. And the beautiful thing about the way that we're learning to draw is the closer you get to the drawing, the more obvious it becomes that what you're actually looking at is a drawing, but it still holds its majesty and its mystery, and you know, the ability to convince somebody that what they're looking at is realistic. It has depth and feeling and mood. And I haven't spotted that with and again, I've not seen every artist's work, but it's the same when you look at wonderful paintings. They look absolutely brilliant from a long distance. When your eye and your mind are able to fill in the blanks, there's some wonderful works of art. But as you get closer and closer to the picture or the painting, the illusion starts to disappear. It's a little bit like when you go very close to the television set and you start to see the pixels and the illusion is immediately broken. I think I've mentioned before, I've got a couple of drawings up on my wall of my house. One of them's of my dog Kira, and the other one is of one of my daughters. And when people first see them from a distance, they think they're photographs. And then they get closer and they go, wow, you know, they are drawings, but it's still very convincing, even from quite close up. And that's one thing that I love about this. So we're getting a nice layer of HB in that area. And I'm going to darken up now again with a 2B. In actual fact, let's go into the darkest areas with a 4B. So I've got a couple of new pencils out. The eagle-eyed of you out there will have noticed that my pencils I'm using in today's video are a little bit longer than what I've been using recently. So I've just gone into my stash and treated myself to a couple of brand new pencils because they were just becoming a little bit hard to manipulate and keep a very smooth and natural stroke. But like we said, with the technique that we're adopting, this idea of pulling the pencil towards you and constantly turning the pencil so that we self-sharpen, we don't actually go through pencils very often. I think the HB, 2B and the 4B that I was using, certainly for the last 58 lessons and possibly before that with some of my other work that we haven't necessarily covered in the group, they've been the same pencils. This is the first time in a long time that I've actually changed them. You can get these pencils from Amazon, so they're called the Caran D'ache grafwood. I've also used the Faber-Castell. I think they're the 9000 series. Whatever pencil that you settle on is absolutely fine. Just get to know the pencil. Now, I know for a fact that when I use the Faber-Castell pencils, which I haven't done for quite a while, an HB in the Faber-Castell is more like my 2H in the Caran D'ache. So just as long as you don't expect every single pencil brand to be exactly the same value, an HB in one brand may be the equivalent to a 2B in another. So whatever you settle on, whatever you get the hang of, stick with it, get to learn the subtleties of it. I can use the 4H in my Caran D'ache grafwood and still get some nice value from that. Whereas with the Faber-Castell pencils, the 4H is so light, it's not really worth using. Now, there are many other grades of pencil. I was just looking through my pencils when I was pulling out a couple of new ones, and I've got F's, H's, 3B's, 3H's. So again, experiment with them. You might find that you like to use a HB, 3B, 6B. That's absolutely fine. Just get to grips with your pencils. Know what they can do. Know what they can't do. Enjoy the process. Seems like such a long time ago, but I can remember when I first started drawing, I just grabbed anything that I had in the house, and I had no idea what a 2B pencil was and what a 2H was, and everything I did was random, and there was no method to anything. I'll have to try and dig out some of my very first drawings that I thought were quite good at the time. Lovely. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, and I'm just going to start by making it into a point, and I'm just going to start taking out some value around this edge, because I've identified this edge as being one of the very lightest areas in our drawing. This is something that I do initially, and straight away I like to look where my darkest zones are and look where the lighter areas are going to be. And clearly the darkest area on our drawing, and on most drawings, are going to be your eyes, the pupils of your eyes. And this dog is no different. But then it's looking, where are your lightest areas? And our lightest areas are going to be around the top right of the forehead, but also these lovely floppy ears. Now, as you can see, I'm not dragging the eraser like you would do when you're rubbing something out in, you've made a mistake on some writing that you'd made. I'm just dabbing. And this is where you start to see the beauty of the technique that we've been developing. I'm only just touching the surface, and I'm able to take out value. And it doesn't look like I've just gone in there with an eraser and made a unrealistic swipe. I can do that, of course, if I wanted to do. I could even get some white hairs in there if that's what was required. But for now, I'm just going to bring the value back in these areas. And then give it another very, very quick brush, just to soften it down slightly. And that's the process we're going to be using throughout the rest of this dog. I'm conscious now of the time. We're at 33, 34 minutes, and I like to try and keep these videos down to about half an hour. So what we're going to continue doing is I'm going to continue working on this left side of the face. I'm going to go in with the HB and get some of these darker shadows in, and work the 2B, pull out some of the highlighted areas, again with the kneaded eraser. And I'm also going to build up some of this darker value that we can see in here. I'm going to bring the contrast up in there, just so that we've got something to work off with the bottom of the ear. But another good half an hour session. We're starting to get some realism into that dog's ear now. That's starting to look more dimensional and like it has a fold and a crease to it, which is what we're looking for. As always, thank you so much for supporting the channel, the Facebook group. You do all make it a wonderful place to be and learn and have some fun. And if you've not join the Facebook group, then go ahead and do it. Subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Hit subscribe, smack the notifications button, follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.